When I drag out the layout grid, I'm going to clear the search in the Properties Inspector so you can see the two new properties that are brought up, rows and columns. A uniform grid lays everything out in even cells, row and column-wise, and it will dynamically set the number of rows of columns based on how many elements are inside it. I'm going to drag the number 1 into the uniform grid, and at the moment, as there's only one element, it is centered as the only cell. Now watch what happens when I bring the second control in. Now I have one row, but 2 columns that are evenly distributed. I can bring in the third control, and then the fourth. Now when I bring in number 5, it switches everything to 3 rows by 3 columns instead of 2 by 2. It will also clip each one of those cells based on the size that's attributed to them. So if I don't want the top row to be clipped like that, I need to increase the height of my grid. Now, as the rows and columns in the Property Inspector are still displaying 0, this means that's going to take its default state, but I can force it to have exactly 2 rows or exactly 2 columns by explicitly stating the values. If there are more elements than will fit, the uniform grid by default will create additional rows instead of additional columns. I can reset these properties to return the uniform grid to its default behavior. These are the layout containers established in the Windows Presentation Foundation. There's one more, which in many ways is the pinnacle of the layouts, the grid. By default, when you create a new project, the new project is of type grid. And if you look carefully in the Property Inspector, you'll notice that the controls that I've created for this project, they have the icon to indicate that they are grids as well. The grid has the most functionality for relaying out your user interface than any other layout container. Let's take a look at how it works. I'm going to remove my existing controls from the uniform grid, as I've done before. And then drag them out of the uniform grid once again. I'm done with that uniform grid, so I'm going to delete it. And now I'm going to add a new grid control to my window.